That was the moment when I was most afraid, because only then did I realize what had been obvious from the start. I'd idolized the heroes. I thought of them as invulnerable mythical figures. But the awful truth was, they were just men. They could die just like everyone else. And if they could die, then I had no chance at all. Death had been a constant companion on that journey, but never had it felt so close than in that moment. So that was a small excerpt from The Coward by Stephen Aron. I read this book. I just finished it recently, a few days ago, and this was a journey. I liked it. First of all, I thought it was really great. Yeah, so I guess I'll just get right into the interview. I guess I'll just get right into the review. Hi everyone, welcome back to Plot Twists, the channel where we talk about all things reading, writing, and plot. Today I am reviewing The Coward by Stephen Aron. And it was really good. I liked it a lot. The whole premise of the story was about a man named Kel Carissa, I believe. I'm sorry. Kel, in this day and age, is a hero, or is considered a hero by many. He went on a journey with 12 other heroes at just the tender age of 17, and he was the only survivor. The journey was to the ice fields up north, as they call it, to defeat an ice lich that had been trying to slowly cover the world in ice and frost and death and things like that. So obviously a very hard and perilous journey, and as I said before, Kel was the only one to return. He had slain the ice lich, and he had suffered tremendously for it. He has extreme PTSD, and I love that about it. That was probably my favorite thing about this book. A lot of the times when you read fantasy and things like that, you have these grand adventures, and you know there's danger, and you know death and things like that are constantly there. But we don't really talk about what happens after. We don't talk about what happens to the heroes after. And that's primarily because we view heroes as mythical figures, as Kel puts it. People that can't be killed, can't be hurt. The people who, against all odds, strive and defeat the evil and continue on. But often we're unfortunately very much reminded that our heroes are not mythical figures. They are people, and they suffer and they go through hard times, and they're not perfect. Certainly none of the heroes in this book were perfect. Kel does mention throughout the story how each of them died, how things happened as well, the truth of the matter. And the truth is something that he's been hiding from everybody, because he doesn't want the image of the heroes to be sullied. So as he went on this journey, he realized that these were, in some cases, really awful men. Some cases they were downright assholes. And none of them died particularly well. None of them died heroically or anything like that. He's constantly talking about how one would die in the middle of the night, frozen to death. Many of them cried for their mothers as they were dying. So yeah, it was gritty. And, I thought when I was initially reading this book that I would have preferred more description about these deaths and things like that, and I wanted the narrative to go more in depth of that. But then as I was reading along, I realized that this book is primarily about PTSD. It's primarily about Kel and his inability to face his past. Hence the name The Coward. He actively tries to run away when he is called again to serve the kingdom and go back into the ice fields. And that's what starts this whole story off, he is called again by the king. It's 10 years later, I believe. Yeah, it's something like 10 years later. The Ice Lich seems to be back. A lot of the same signs are returning. So he's asked once again to take up Slayer, his famous sword that he used to slay the Ice Lich before, and kill it again, or at least investigate the situation up north. And Kel, for obvious reasons, does not want to go. But he's kind of forced to, not by any physical means, obviously, but by just general, we're going to be watching you go and make sure you go and things like that. And along the way, he attempts to run, but then he gets his call to action, and without giving away too much from there, the story continues from that on. So yeah, it's a really good take on PTSD. It hits a little close. If anybody suffers from PTSD, a lot of what's going on with Kel in particular is probably going to resonate with you. He has flashbacks. He freezes during certain situations, which I thought was interesting because we finally have a hero that freezes, that is scared and shows his vulnerability. You don't get that too often in high fantasy like this. So it was really wonderful to see that happening. So let's talk about characters. There's numerous characters in here. I will be honest, I've forgotten many of their names. And it isn't because they weren't interesting people at all. It's just a lot of them had insignificant roles. They were crucial to the plot in a way, like the king that ultimately sends Kel away. He's very crucial to the plot, but he doesn't spend a whole lot of time in the book. You give flashbacks to him occasionally, and to his daughter as political movements happen in the background of Kel's journey, which is interesting, but I'll get into that when we talk about plot later. So unfortunately I did forget a lot of their names, but it didn't mean that they were bad characters. They were just decoration, more or less, for it. Let's talk about Kel first. Kel is an interesting character. As I said before, he does suffer from PTSD, and he is a hero that doesn't want to be a hero. He's a hero that does not want to be called a hero, and in a lot of cases, yeah, you can just call him a coward. He tries to run away constantly. He's bitter about what happened to him, and he's also a little jealous, too, of the heroes. I don't know if jealous is the right word. I guess he's disgusted, in a way, by the heroes and what happened to them, because they are still told in this grand, heroic visage. I can talk. Which, granted, is something that Kel wanted initially. When he returned the first time, he spoke to the king and explained his story. The story was then given to a famous bard who put it into like this long, elaborate ballad, which is often quoted in this book. I'll say it's just little poems, little snippets of what the ballad is, that generally speaking have something to do with that chapter. But yeah, so it's just interesting because Kel, as I said, he agreed with the king to preserve the image of the heroes. So he wasn't really meant to tell anybody how they died. Or he could say how they died, but not that they were crying, or that they pissed themselves, or they cried for their parents, or anything like that. They just to keep their deaths heroic. And Kel seems almost jealous of this, or upset by it, because everybody's taking it as gospel that the heroes died well, they died heroically, and they seem to be making light of his struggle and the things that he went through, and not taking into account that these heroes could have been particularly bad men. Kel saw the worst sides of them, and nobody else sees that, and it's kind of like having a friend in high school, I guess, that everybody loves, and you're sitting there like the real them, that they're rude or they're abusive to people, things like that, and nobody believes you. Even though Kel has a lot of sway and things like that, he's constantly badgered by people to tell them stories about what happened because they want to hear the truth from his mouth. And as he mentions a lot, nobody ever wants to actually hear the truth. Because if they hear the truth, then the magic is gone, and it was just a tragedy, and people already have enough to work with, or have enough to suffer through without more tragedy. So Kel is in this interesting position of wanting to preserve the hope, but at the same time angry that nobody seems to notice the agony that he went through. So it's really interesting to see him struggle with that. He'll occasionally break down and tell people the truth, and naturally they don't believe him. They just walk away, or if they do believe him, he sees the hope drain from their eyes and things like that. So there are a few other characters in the book. The first character that Kel ends up meeting on his journey, initially he was meant to go on this journey alone, mostly because there are no heroes left. There are no big name heroes left and things like that. But the first person to join him on this quest is Garen. And unfortunately, Garen is much like Kel when he went on the initial journey. He is 17. He has come straight from a farm. He stole his dad's sword and his dad's horse, much like Kel did. He has no idea how to fight. He's never actually held a sword before, much like Kel did. So Kel sees this nightmare reoccurring in this boy, and he makes every attempt to get Garen to leave, but Garen just refuses and continues on with him, because Garen is convinced that he'll have the same outcome as Kel. And some other things end up happening. Garen, without giving away too much, Garen learns the truth about Kel, and learns the truth that Kel is a coward. Or at least he deems himself a coward. There's this little shift in dynamics between them, and it's just interesting watching Garen, this kind of mirror image of Kel, and that's really what Garen's character is supposed to be. It's a mirror image of Kel at that age, ready to go on this journey that he really shouldn't be going on, and struggling with it. Kel specifically struggling with it because he doesn't want this kid to get hurt. But at the same time, he, at least in his mind, he knows that he's not going. So what does it really matter? And if he just left the kid, or if he, did run away, who's going to believe Garen? Nobody would believe him because everybody believes the story. They would all believe that he went to the ice fields and killed the lich, or maybe died up there, or whatever. So Kel struggles with what to do with Garen. Garen himself is an interesting character too, because he has intelligence. He has quite a lot of intelligence, actually, but at the same time, he's not smart. He does not have a lot of street smarts, as most people would say. He's got mostly book smarts. He can tell when people are lying. He can decipher things like, buying stuff at the market and things like that, or he can talk about various legends, but he doesn't really know what to do on the road. So he's learning. He's very hopeful, which is really nice. Garen certainly represents the hope of a new journey. The hope that everybody starts out with on this journey, that everything's going to be okay. And so that's Garen's main role in the story. So after Garen comes Vali, the bard. Volley was probably my favorite character, honestly. Next to Kel. Kel was a great character too, but Volley definitely stole the show. He's your typical flamboyant bard, interested in everybody in terms of wanting to be with them, you know. Um, Dressed flamboyantly, constantly has to be the center of attention, always up for a joke, always up for a song. And the reason he joins the party is he wants to rewrite the saga. He wants to write his own saga, I should say. He wants to be more famous than the bard that did the original saga for Kel. And he wants to do a better one. And so that's his driving force. But there's more to Volley than meets the eye. He very much has a hidden side to him. And I won't go into too much detail because it is rather important to the plot. He's just an interesting character. He's your typical bard without being your typical bard, which I thought was really great. He has a great character arc as well. He has a great personality, being hard-edged, kind, funny, all at the same time. He's often taking care of Garen along the journey. He's often trying to protect the boy, but at the same time, he's rather annoyed by him by certain things. And he also is rather supportive of Kel and everything Kel does. He kind of ends up turning into Kel's right hand, which I thought was great. Normally it would be maybe Bronwyn the Barbarian. She shows up later. But no, instead it's the Bard, which I thought was interesting. He's very worldly as well. He's traveled, obviously, long distances. And he's jealous and, maybe not the greatest guy in the world either, but he's still fun and adventurous and fairly brave, too. He does not seem at all perturbed by this harrowing journey that they are going on. All right, so the next two characters, I'm going to put these together because one character shows up at pretty much the very end, and while he is important and while he does do a lot, the way they meet him and the way he joins the journey is just is part of the story that I thought was a little lacking. And I'll explain that when I go into the plot. So the next two characters that he meets are Bronwyn. She is basically your barbarian type, but she is a huge woman. I think she's described as she's almost as wide as she is tall, which I'm not sure how that works, but I just imagine her being this block of a woman. But she's fantastic. I love her too. She's a prime example of a great, strong female character without being in your face that, oh my god, she's a woman and she's doing this. She can do this because she's a woman and she's strong. So being a woman isn't really in her character at all, which I liked a lot because I get so tired of I am woman, hear me roar kind of characters. They annoy me, and that's their only personality. But Bronwyn actually had a lot of personality, and I liked her a lot. She can definitely hold her beer. There are many, many scenes of her drinking literal taverns full of people under the table. So it was just astonishing how much she could put away, just for any human being. I'm not entirely certain she was human, so we'll see about that, I suppose. And then there's Malamir, who claims to be a king from an island that everybody has heard of, but nobody's ever really gone to, and nobody in this kingdom seems to really care about. It's just this island that people know about, don't have a lot of trade with, don't have a lot of knowledge about, but they're not hostile, so who cares? So Malamir is fantastic as well. He was completely drunk when they first met him, and he was talking nonsense, basically. He was having fun drinking and just waiting, and he tells Kel, hey, I'm going to go with you on this journey, and Kel is just like, all right. But it was just a strange, very, very strange, kind of inconsequential meeting of this character, which I oddly liked, but it oddly left me confused as well. And so yeah, those are the main characters, I would say. There are other characters, as I said, that go on in the background, but for the most part, those would be the main characters. All right, and so finally, let's go ahead and talk about the plot of the book, which is, what the name of the channel is and what we should talk about. So the plot I thought was really interesting. Like I said, it was a story that we don't normally get to see. We don't get to see the backlash of a harrowing journey. We don't usually get to see the aftermath of said journey and things like that. But at the same time, I did have issues with it. So while I love this book, and I am tempted to read it again to see if I can catch some things that had gone on in the background, because there's a lot of politics and religion stuff happening in here. It is kind of bland in that sense. And I don't really want to say bland because there's a lot of action, there's a lot of really nice prose in here as well. But it seemed like the background stuff just didn't have as much heart. And honestly, a lot of the characters and a lot of things like that, anything that wasn't Kel or scenery or a fight, just didn't really seem to have as much heart as the rest of it. So it was clear that the battles and Kel's personality and the struggles were the main focus. But you didn't get that classic fantasy of, grand adventure and getting to know all the characters. And that was another thing. We actually don't get to know a lot about the other characters. We know surface level stuff. We know basic things like that. But we don't really get to know much more about them than that. We don't get to dive too deep into them. And unfortunately, it leaves the ending a little bit wanting. I obviously won't go into the ending, so there's no spoilers. But yeah, the ending, I understand, or as I felt, was just wanting. And I know there's a sequel, but there's also a lot of questions that weren't answered in this book that I feel like needed to be in this book. Because even though there is a sequel, there are certain events that happen that don't allow for these questions to be answered, ever. The ending was just a little wanting. And for what is this, essentially a travel book, because it takes a long time for Kel to really go on the journey itself. It takes a long time for him to meet the rest of his band. It takes a long time for them to even get to any significant destination. And that's primarily because in the background it does flip to other characters that are doing other things, because it's setting up the background of the political climate and the religious aspects and things like that are going on, that are all tied to Kel and his mission. And you see that very clearly. And you can see why Kel and the others won't see it either, just because it's just too much. They wouldn't understand. They wouldn't be able to make the connections. But Kel does seem to be making a few connections here and there. But obviously he won't see the grand picture because he's not meant to yet. It's interesting, and just, it's one of those books that it takes a long time to do anything, but at the same time it's really engaging. And I don't really know how to describe it further than that. It grips you, but when you stop and you think about it, you go, that took 12 chapters just to get to the first leg of the journey. And for a book that's a little over 400 pages long, that's, 400 and 9 pages long. That's a long time to not do anything with your plot, really. So it's not an action heavy book, I would say. There is a lot of action, especially towards the end. Um, there's a lot of battles, there's a lot of things like that. But otherwise, I would not call it an action heavy book. So if you're more into books that have a ton of sword fights at every corner, things like that, I don't know if this would be the book for you. It does have that eventually, but it might be too far down the line to keep your interest. But if you can hang in there, some great fight scenes, and some great battles and some great hardships and things like that. All in all, I think I would have to give it a 4 out of 5, and which is, I believe, what I did on Goodreads, was give it a 4 out of 5. Because while it was amazing, and while I love the concept, and while I thought it was really fresh, it does leave a little bit wanting. I'm really hopeful for the sequel, though. I do want the sequel, so I'm waiting very patiently for that, which I believe it is due in August. In my copy, there is an excerpt from the first chapter of the next book, which I have concerns about because it starts in a weird place. But all in all, yeah, it was a very good book. It's very much worth the read. If you want a story about PTSD, but you still want magic, fantasy, and things like that, this is the book for you. Lots of world building too, which I love. I love world building, but it does tend to focus more on what's happening around Kel. And also Kel is rather worldly too, so he knows a lot of this stuff, and he's really just giving it to you so you know. But that doesn't mean to say that it's it's telling, not showing either. It's just it's just Kel kind of, I would say, reaffirming things in his head, because it's been 10 years since he really went anywhere. But yeah, all in all, final thoughts. It's a great book. I love it. I can't wait for the sequel. It has some issues that I think might turn a lot of people away from it, but if you can hang through it, I think it's very rewarding, and it does leave you guessing as to what's going to happen next. So yeah, again, that was The Coward by Stephen Aaron. Definitely check it out if this sounds like your type of thing. So that's it for today. I hope you like this video. Let me know if you want more review videos as I read. I've been a little slow lately because I'm in a bit of a slump, but I'll try and fix that as much as I can. Anyway, yeah, so let me know if you've read this book, what you thought about it, what you liked, what you didn't like about it. Yeah, and just go ahead, have a conversation with me and see what happens. Thank you again for watching Plot Twist, and have a great day. Keep reading.